really going to be really fun. So, hey, Code Keepers, it's time for another great episode of Get on Code. I have this book here with me. Running is a Kind of Dreaming, and I have the author here with me as well. And I know you're saying, Seiko, what's this have to do with empowerment? What's this have to do with Black empowerment? Stay tuned. All right, welcome to Get on Code, the Fly Guy Show, which is a series of melanated conversations focused on empowerment, health, wealth, and knowledge of self.
People think in binary choices because they are conditioned to.
And on the wall was a picture of a wolf and a lion. I think the wolf was the Democratic Party, the lion was the Republicans.
But the drug trade and all these illegal stuff that people do, that's still economics. It's just that they couldn't do it in a traditional system.
We're talking about melanated wealth.
So we can build wealth, but we just, for some reason, don't seem to be able to transfer it.
You had a great experience. Fine. That means nothing.
What were you told as a child about education? You had to be how many times better?
Every impression without an expression becomes depression.
All right, holding the memoir in my hands again. Running is a kind of dreaming. Man. So for all my runners out there, hey, running, grab this book. J.M. Thompson, PhD. Good to have you on the show. Time to get on code. Our show is really heavily about empowerment. And one of the things that I found intriguing about your book and your story is in the depths of despair, you found a way to really empower yourself towards improved mental health. And not only that, now you have stories and you have proof of concept that can help others.
Yeah. Well, Seiko, the thing about running, my experience of this was in the depths of suicidal depression in 2004, 2005, which is where I was at back then. Really, I had attempted suicide. It was pretty bleak. And I found running, and in terms of empowerment, right, I guess the main takeaway there is the power is within, right? The power is within us, right? So I for years and years and years had looked for something outside of myself, and I was running away from difficult experiences, running away from myself, running away from memories that made no sense, so I couldn't handle from my traumatic childhood. And the shift from that runaway kind of spirit towards running was really about knowing the power is within, and we can tolerate really difficult experiences. You can turn towards adversity, you can learn to cope with it, you can learn to put one front foot in front of the other, literally and metaphorically, to get stronger, more confident, connect with your community, connect with the world around you, and continue on the path towards well-being and liberation.
Well-being and liberation, two key words I really love. Well-being, liberation. And one of the beautiful things about liberation, when I've studied liberating forces, people who have really been focused on liberation, they all talked about, liberation is within. KRS-One has a quote where he says, emancipation is long overdue, so it becomes procrastination because freedom is within you. And that really goes along with your quote, run before it's too late and you're stuck down there. Run right now. I like the sense of urgency that comes with that. So you attempted suicide.
Yeah, I did.
And you found that running was a way to deal with the emotional pains and challenges that you were trying to kill off. So why was it important to start running right then? Run before it's too late and you're stuck down there. Talk about that.
So I'd grown up throughout my teens and 20s with cyclical depression. It was pretty bad, but I could kind of just about manage it. Things really unraveled in my early 30s. I couldn't handle it anymore. I did talk therapy. I tried medication. I just got worse and worse and worse. And then, you know, I was in the psych ward in San Francisco, and I had attempted suicide. And I probably would have attempted again because nothing made me feel good. I felt just horrific all the time. And I knew I needed to do something. And this impulse just emerged to me while I was on an exercise break on the rooftop basketball court of the psychiatric hospital in San Francisco. Run right now. And so I did. I started doing these sprints back and forth on the basketball court. And you know, came into my body and felt something. I felt like I was alive and I was here right now. And it was a little glimmer, a little glimpse of light in the kind of darkness that had engulfed me for so long. So and that was really the beginning of the path that took me towards recovery.
Wow. And Dr. Thompson, it's amazing to me that as I've talked to people about empowerment, and I've read great books like your book, Running is a Kind of Dreaming, our author, J.M. Thompson, as I've talked with people who are focused on empowerment and have used empowerment techniques and strategies, and they come in such varied forms, all of them find that there's something, some talent, some gift, something they already have within them. It's like the creator provides you your own safety net.
Yeah, well, I think what I would want your community, your viewers and listeners to know is about, I think the lesson here is about turning towards and trusting your own inner wisdom, trusting your own experience. So what running provides, the book is about running, but this probably is the same if you're an artist, a musician, if you're a chef. There's all kinds of things that are like this, right? Where, you know, as opposed to listening to the opinions of other people, I'm not saying don't listen to trusted guides, but I'm also saying, you know, think about in all our wisdom traditions, like the one I'm trained in, which is Buddhism. The Buddha's last words was, be a lamp unto yourself, right? You know, I was raised as a Catholic, and you know, I remember from those teachings, you know, Jesus said, the light of God is within you, right? And so I think across traditions, whether you're a believer or not, there is a way of understanding that the capacity for healing and transformation is deep within us and is actually still there, even in the really bleak times. You know, it might be a little bit like, you know, you're out and it's dark, it's a stormy night, there are clouds everywhere. You know, the moon is still out there. You cannot see it, but it's still out there, right? So the capacity for change and healing transformation is your inheritance as a human being. And maybe in the darkest moments, you can't see that. And you're going to need to be patient to find that little glimmer, like I did, that little glimpse of light. When I started to sprint, I was like, well, this is a little bit different. Find that for you. Maybe for you, it's for runners, it's often running. It might be the arts. It might be, you know, music, right? There are all kinds of healing practices. Find that little glimpse of light. The light is within you. And then tend that fire and use that and find ways to cultivate that. That's my understanding of empowerment, which is quite different from the way that, at least in white Western society, we have been trained. Certainly, I was trained to think about healing is about, you know, you go outside and you seek something else or someone else. I'm not against doing that, just to be clear, but I do believe there are capacities we have that are profound and deep and go really to the core of what it is to be a human.
Well, you've given, you know, one of the strategies, you know, finding that thing that's within you that will help save you, that will give you liberation, give you freedom and empowerment. But you mentioned the darkness the challenging times, the stress, the depravity. So for those of us who haven't gotten to that point, and maybe even those who've been in that point, one of my best friends passed away via suicide in high school, and I'm still struggling with that now, trying to understand it. So what is the experience of suicidal depression? And why do I have to take a breath when I talk about Juan becoming an ancestor by his own means? Why is it so hard to talk about?
First of all, Seiko, I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. I mean, I think that you what you embody right now is that when one of our brothers or sisters leaves us in this particular way, it's wrenching, right? It leaves a wound, right, in a very particular way that is hard to handle, so my experience of what that was like is, there is the way I talk about it in the book is, ordinary sadness is like, and the difference between ordinary sadness and severe depression is like the difference between water and ice, right? Like, imagine someone who knew what water was, but they were from some alien world where there was no such thing as ice, and you were trying to explain to them, like, let's say you were completely encased in ice and like you were freezing to death, and they say, like, aren't you like, this is like basically water? You're like, well, yeah, kind of, but no, it's a different state. You're in a different state of consciousness altogether, and it is unrelentingly excruciating. It is as painful, probably on an emotional level, as, like, I don't know, being on fire is like, like acute pain. There seems to be no relief. And then, what comes up in the mind of someone in that state? I'll tell you what comes up. It's one question: how do I stop this pain? So for a while, I looked around for ways to alleviate that. In my teens and 20s, drinking, doing drugs, running away from difficulty. But eventually everything that I had tried stopped working. There was quite literally, there was nowhere to run. I was stuck with feelings that were hellish. And then what happens is, what happened for me is the thought, oh, you know what? There's a solution to this. It's really horrific, but there is a solution, and it is to end my life. The first time I had that thought, it was horrifying. And the thought seemed to be almost like not even part of me. It seemed to have come from some other dimension of my mind. And it was horrible. I ignored it, but it came back and came back and came back. Pretty soon, after a few weeks of this, it was, imagine someone playing like a tape loop saying, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. There's a bridge, jump off that. There's a car, you could run in front of that right now. There's a train, you could jump in front of it right now. Why? Do it, do it, do it. It wasn't a literal voice. I'm not saying I was hearing voices like that. It was like a thought, but it would not stop. And I began to feel like, you know what? I'm not seeing many ways out of this apart from this idea that, I could actually just extricate myself from this hellish pain by dying by suicide. So that was the experience. And I, after many years now on the other side of the therapeutic couch, so to speak, speaking to folks in recovery or in the midst of suicidal depression, I believe that something like that is a fairly universal experience of the, last year there was 44,000 or thereabouts Americans who died by suicide, 1.4 million who attempted suicide. Something like that experience of like horrific pain all the time. And you know what? I want out. That's the experience. And, sadly, of course, sometimes people get to a point where they act on those thoughts. And depending on the means, it ends up becoming, unfortunately, a decision that is irreversible, which, of course, is the tragedy of suicide. Most things in our life, you commit a crime, you can seek forgiveness or whatever. You attempt suicide, and there's potentially no coming back from that. So of course the imperative in our families and communities and society is to find ways for people to just live one more day, because while you're still alive, there is hope.
Yeah, that's difficult to comprehend, and I'm sure it's even more difficult to grapple with, to think that it's so overwhelming, so repetitive. I guess often we think of it as happening so quickly. Why did Juan do that just so quickly? This situation happened with a girl, and 2 days later, he's an ancestor. So I never have really considered that he may have had a deep welling depression, and the suicidal thoughts were repetitive. So we're talking with the author of this great book, Running is a Kind of Dreaming. You can get the book wherever you buy great books. Running is a Kind of Dreaming. They have it on Amazon. I'm lucky that I got my copy in advance. Make sure you pick up your copy so we can learn how others can find the empowerment that Dr. Thompson found. So we were just talking about the trauma, the challenge, that deepness, that deep depression. So how does that impact the body, the mind, and the nervous system?
Well, trauma, we hear this word more now in the media and the news and so forth. And, what is trauma? Trauma really is an experience, an overwhelming experience that transcends your capacity and resources to cope with it. So abuse, neglect, oppression, of course, for the experience for many people in the BIPOC community, women too, is of oppression of various kinds, or misogyny, sexual assault. These experiences, and by the way, especially when we're young, when we're children and young people, if we're coping with experiences that are overwhelming for us, they leave a mark on the mind, body, and nervous system in significant ways. The experience of being overwhelmed in that way is that you think about an ordinary day, an ordinary set of memories, right? You go to work, you have your lunch, you have dinner with your family, you watch Netflix or whatever, and the next day you remember a few things. There's a whole bunch of things you probably don't remember. It doesn't really matter. It's sort of, you integrate that into your sense of who you are, and life moves on. With trauma, what happens is whatever it was that happened, the memories are very fragmentary, typically. They're very confusing. You might have some flashes of very, very vivid experiences that were horrific. You might have lots of gaps between those flashes. And primarily what you would have is feelings deep inside you that are really hard to bear, right? So especially when we're young, when we're kids can tend to internalize messages that, the bad stuff that happened to them was their fault. I'm bad. I'm no good. I don't deserve to be happy. Nothing good is ever going to happen to me. Life is pointless. All of those thoughts are really the long-term traces on the mind and nervous system of experiences that occurred to us, but kind of overwhelmed the mind's capacity to sort of make sense and integrate them, so that the past stays in the past. For those of us who experience trauma, the past stays present. The clock may move on, the calendar may move on, but in a sense, as I talk about in the book, it's the time it's always been. You're still going through those feelings and can be triggered quite quickly into sort of re-experiencing the emotions around whatever was traumatic, as if it's happening right now. Maybe it happened 30 years ago. It feels like it's still happening right now. That's the experience of millions of trauma survivors in the U.S. and across the world.
Interesting. So I know that, as a person of African and indigenous descent, we very often talk about how drumming, dancing, and singing and, just community activity helps someone to deal with challenge. We talk about how in the work songs really kind of developed with the enslaved who were trying to make sense of it all and just had a communal activity. Even though they were doing something they were forced to do under threat of death, they found that singing and even acting and having a ritual dance and doing some of the work with the sugar cane, or if it was the cotton or whatever the crop was or whatever they were working on, in Charleston when they were building the streets with oyster shells. And that kind of reminds me of in your book where you talk about how running freed you. So this term ultra running was brand new to me. Tell me about ultra running.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start off by your observation about drumming in the Black and Indigenous community. And I think the through line here is, think about running and drumming. They're both rhythmic, right? There is a predictability. You think about trauma, it's the opposite of that. Whatever sense of reality you had, whatever sense of structure and order and predictability, it's torn into pieces. There's no rhythm. Recovery and healing is about restoring a kind of rhythm and predictability in life. So that's probably the through line through many traditions that are healing, which is to find ways in a very physical way to restore a kind of rhythmic structure to the body and the mind and the spirit, especially in the context of community. You talk about drumming in the Black and Indigenous communities. That's in community. One thing I talk about in the book, I was privileged in the midst of my descent into addiction, and depression addiction. For a few years, I was a member too of a gospel choir in San Francisco, the Glide Ensemble, and there too, the experience of musicality and rhythm was very helpful. What is ultra running? So ultra running is running more than a regular marathon. Regular marathon is 26.2 miles. Ultra running is anything longer than that. So the distances are 30 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles. A little bit of history that's interesting is it was actually created by African-American man Ted Corbett, who grew up in Dunbarton, South Carolina, grandson of slaves. He discovered he wasn't allowed to ride on the bus because he was in the Jim Crow South. He ran to school every day. Ted Corbett ended up becoming, he was an elite world-class runner. He was one of the founders of the New York City Marathon. So that's an interesting kind of through line here too. Running helps trauma because, the clue is really in the title here. Running is a kind of dreaming. What I've experienced through distance running is it's a sort of kind of waking dream state. And in that dream state, the thinking mind, the part of the mind, the brain that remembers the past, that's thinks about the future, that's kind of caught up in traumatic thoughts, that part goes quiet, and you kind of shift into the emotional centers of the brain, thinking kind of random thoughts that kind of stitch together in this new way, after which you feel like you can kind of sense you'll kind of see your own life from a wider perspective. Just like going to sleep with some problem on your mind and then waking up after a good night's sleep and you kind of know the answer. Running kind of functions as a sort of waking dream that I experienced, and I think many runners would attest to this, kind of provides a way of sort of reflecting and integrating difficult experience. I'm glad you had the picture of Ted Corbett up there. All ultra runners owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Corbett.
Wow. Didn't see that one coming. Ashe. So salute the ancestor. Last question that's, primarily about the book. And once again, we're talking with the author, Dr. J.M. Thompson. Running is a kind of dreaming. J.M. Thompson, PhD. I'll get that right. So if somebody's struggling right now, with whatever the challenge is, what can they learn from your book? And even if they can't get the book, what do you want them to know?
Well, I hope that people will get the book and read the book. And ultimately, the book is a story. And it's a story of one person's descent into the underworld, into the abyss of depression and addiction, and then the journey out of that. And I hope that people will, reading that, whether they're going through something themselves right now or know someone who's going through something like that right now, will feel less alone. Some feeling of kind of solace and connection in journeying with me as I recreate that journey and seeing that there is a pathway to the other side. I do talk about some of the general principles along the way that I believe are helpful. In a more practical way, I would want anyone going through something right now where they're feeling hopeless to know, I guess I would say to them what someone said to me when I was really at absolute rock bottom, and I was in the hospital, and a therapist whose name was Mike, I identify him as Mike in the book, said to me, I want you to know that I have faith in you. And I said, well, I don't know how that's possible because I don't have faith in myself. And he looked at me with a kind of expression that I could really register in his eyes. This guy is not just making this stuff up. He means that he's communicating something to me deep about what's going on between the two of us right now. He said, I know that. And that's the reason I'm going to hold the faith for you, because you can't right now. And I guess that's what I would want to say. I don't know. I've never met your listeners or viewers, but I consider everyone listening and everyone who is a member of your community, my brothers and sisters on the path towards liberation. That would be my aspiration, at least. And what I would wish for them is to know that I have faith in you. I have faith in your capacity as a human to find the light that is within you. Perhaps you can't find it yourself. Perhaps you need someone caring out who you can turn towards and share what you're going through right now, and let them know that you're suffering, and have them invest their faith in you to stay a while, stay another day, and know that recovery is possible. Finally, I want folks to know that if you're really struggling right now, there are trained caring professionals, a number of national helplines available 24/7. And you can find that list actually at my website, which is runningisakindofdreaming.com. There is a list of helplines there with 1-800 numbers and websites for folks who need immediate support who are in a crisis. But know that you're not alone.
Know that you're not alone. Know that you're not alone. We've been spending some great time with J.M. Thompson, PhD. I love that. His book is Running is a Kind of Dreaming, and he gave us a history lesson. I just had to put that up there. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love what you're doing. I love your book. And I would say, hey, listeners, viewers, running is a kind of dreaming. I didn't have a lot of time to chat with you today, so maybe we'll get a chance to do a part 2 because I had some other questions I would love to get.
I would love that.
Running is a kind of dreaming. Pick up the book. As you can see, this is great for a nice weekend. And stay on code, learn the code. The code is empowerment. Become the code, teach the code. And if you're struggling, read the book, do some movement. Maybe running is for you, maybe dancing is for you. But within you is something that will help you deal with whatever depths that you're dealing with. Because we were built to navigate these waters. So let's navigate. Have a great day, peace, and prosperity.